Where does fear come from? You'll read about it right back in the Garden of Eden. You'll find that when God made man, He pronounced everything as good. There was no fear. The animals didn't eat each other. There was no harm. Nobody hurt each other. But we see that right back in the Garden of Eden, immediately after Adam and Eve had sinned and disobeyed God, immediately fear enters in. And when God comes walking in the garden to look for them, and He says, Adam, where are you? Adam's hiding because he's full of fear. And the moment he says to God, I was afraid and hid, God says, you ate the fruit, didn't you? Didn't you? There'd been no fear before then. Satan is the author of fear. And fear entered this world through sin. And today, Satan and sin are still the source of fear. Hebrews 2:14 says this, so then as the children are partakers of flesh and blood, He also Himself likewise took part of the same, that through death He might destroy him that had the power of death, that is, the devil, and deliver them who through fear of death were all their lifetime subject to bondage. Jesus came to set us free from fear. Now I just want to clear something up. Fear starts from failing to see things from God's perspective. Fear was originally meant to be a positive thing, not a negative thing. In Proverbs 1 verse 7 we read this, the fear of the Lord is the start of knowledge, but fools despise wisdom and instruction. Fear was meant to be a reverential submission to the will of God. But Satan corrupted it and changed it into something evil. When God made the world and He looked down on it, He pronounced everything as good. There was no evil in the world. But you know what it is that creates the greatest fear today? Is the very things that God created and called good. Satan took the very things that were designed to be a blessing, and he twisted it and turned it around and used it against us to steal from us the blessing that God intended it to be. Fear will rob you of every blessing that God has in mind for you, because blessings come by faith. And if you can take away a person's faith, you can stop them from entering into the blessing of God. And that is exactly what Satan is out to do. He's out to rob you of every single blessing that God has for you. And the only way he can do it is to negate your faith. And the way he's going to do that is through fear. Fear will neutralize your faith. Fear is based, firstly, and comes from the experiences of life. And we've looked at some of that already. Fear comes from hurtful and negative experiences. For example, guilt from failure. The fear and consequences of your sin and of your failure. And the first thing that Satan wants you to fear is God. Not in a good sense, not a reverential fear that honors Him and bows to His will and submits to Him, but a fear that prevents you from coming to Him at all. The fear of condemnation and guilt is probably the number one fear that Satan tries to inject into every one of us. And God is portrayed as a big ogre with a big stick. Any natural disaster that takes place is classed as an act of God. That's a legal term used in insurance policies. Act of God. Earthquake, hurricane, anything that's destructive, because God's a bad guy. God does these kind of things. God makes little babies die. God makes people suffer and takes away life. God causes women to be abused. It's all God's fault. You must be afraid of God. He's a nasty. Better keep out of His way. And yet He's the source of all blessing. As we looked at, especially as we considered the way of blessing, we saw that God is the source of all blessing. Satan doesn't want you to get blessed. He's going to keep you away. And so the fear of condemnation, the fear of sin, is one of the main fears. Well, we experience that all the time, don't we? We miss it all the time. We sin all the time. We fail all the time. We break God's commandments all the time. The experiences of life that cause the major problems are experiences that are caused during the formative years. Because during the formative years are the period during which those inner templates that regulate our behavior are formed. And we've covered that as we looked at templates and triggers. Three major areas. Firstly, during the womb, as the child is being formed. Early childhood, as the first templates are being placed there under the mother's control. Puberty and adolescence, as the final templates of life are being put in place, preferably under the father's control, according to God's order. And any bad experiences that occur during those periods, they get sealed right in there along with the templates. And they can be with you for the rest of your life. And you've learned to live with them, because you don't even remember where they came in a lot of the time. They got sealed in there. They become part and parcel of the fiber of your character. And you've grown to live with them and just accept them. And just accept that as your lot in life. You've had bad experiences with the creation. Hurtful experiences from animals. Perhaps when you were much younger, you got attacked by a vicious dog. And you're terrified of dogs, especially stray dogs. You don't want to come near them, particularly certain breeds of dog. You're afraid of them. Perhaps you got bitten by some creature, and you're afraid because of the bad experience that you had. You're afraid of God's creation. Perhaps you've had hurtful natural creation experiences, such as drowning. Perhaps you nearly drowned at one stage, fell into water, and you came out blue. Now you have a fear of water. You nearly suffocated at one stage, and you have a fear of closed spaces. Perhaps you fell in a hole or fell off a cliff and broke your arm, and you have a fear of climbing. Oh, the list can go on. Bad experiences in life that leave us full of fear. And then there are the words of others. If you're naughty, the boogeyman's going to come get you. Oh, we're so stupid as parents, aren't we? We are so stupid. Watch out for the boogeyman. And we see the little kid tremble in fear and terror, and we laugh about it. Now, if you don't eat up all your food, the boogeyman's going to come get you. Who's the boogeyman? Come on, tell me who's the boogeyman. I don't know, but he must be terrifying, because everybody's scared of him. He's a nasty. And when you grow up, you see some of these horror movies, and you identify with the boogeyman. Because sure as nuts, he's in the movie there somewhere. He's going to come grab any moment. Fear that's been built into people through the words of others. I remember my parents telling me that if I swallow the grape pips, the grapevine will grow in my stomach. You ever had that? Oh man, I accidentally swallowed some the one day and I was terrified. Well, it was just a joke. A child takes you seriously. That's why the scripture says we must become as a little child. If you do this, then that is going to happen to you. Don't go kissing any guys, you'll fall pregnant. Don't let them touch you. The moment they do that, you'll fall pregnant, you'll be in trouble. All the stories that get sowed into the hearts of young minds that cause fear. Fear. Oh man, so much fear is being created. Women are afraid of getting married because their mother had a bad marriage experience and hated sex. That sex is something to be feared. It's terrifying. Something you're going to have to endure, but man, it's horrible. Fear, fear, fear. You can make up your own list. Think about all the things that you're afraid of, and you're going to find that in a lot of cases, in fact virtually every case, it's going to be based either on a bad experience you had or a bad experience somebody else had that they told you about. And just to make sure that we keep up to date, that we don't lose our fears, we get it pushed out every day on radio and TV. Just switch on your TV and listen to today's news. Just listen to how many people got raped and mugged and murdered and got their goods stolen. Just go and listen to it and see how it inspires your faith. Fear, fear, fear. Eventually you're afraid to even go out of your house. You're afraid to go into the local shops. There's no ways I'm going down to Mexico. They're just going to grab me and throw me into jail. I've heard they're terrible down there. The jails are like prison camps. We've had a lot of people who have been afraid to come and visit us here because of the stories they heard. I don't doubt there's been some bad things happen. I'm afraid to go into America because I've heard how bad they are there. Man, the crime rate is so high. I wouldn't dare to go into one of the big cities like New York or Chicago. Man, I probably won't come out alive. News, bad news. Oh, you people that have seen all the stories about what's going on in Africa. Primitive Africa, where everybody's killing each other all the time. Well, it happens, yes. But people live there and they survive. But we always like to major on the bad news, don't we? And you can take the news on any single country in the world or any single city, and there will be the bad news. And it always sounds worse in the news. And people will write to you and say, man, we heard things were really bad there. We heard you people have been having terrible weather and floods. Are you okay? Are you all right? It's always highly magnified. And if it's not really bad, it's not news. They don't publish it. So you never hear the good news. You never hear what happens from day to day. You don't hear 90% of the good stuff. You just get this little percentage of all the bad stuff. And your mind gets programmed with fear, fear, fear. And then there's always somebody to help it along. He wants you to get as full of fear as he can possibly get you full of fear. The enemy of our souls. Do you know how many demons he has allocated to create fear? And if you're going to come against demon forces and you want to discern them, you don't have the gift of discerning the spirits. Let me give you one that you can pick will hit every time. Just come against the spirit of fear. You'll find one there. Oh yeah. Throw a stone in the pack of dogs, you'll hit the fear one every time. He'll be there. Because it's Satan's greatest weapon against the child of God. It's Satan's greatest weapon against God's creation, humanity, who was made in God's image, who was made to be a blessing, who was made to worship and to love God. Satan does not want man being blessed because man has taken his place. Man was given something that he couldn't have. Man was given access to the tree of life and to heaven, and he wanted to make sure that no man ever gets that. And then fear comes from a curse. And this is a subtle one. And this is one that most people miss. We read way back in the Old Testament when the children of Israel were going into the promised land to go and conquer. How God raised them up and made them mighty warriors, where they would go and conquer the enemy and rout the enemy. Even conquered the city of Jericho with all its walls just by walking around it. Oh, I tell you, who had the fear was the enemies. They were terrified when they saw Israel coming. And after they'd conquered Jericho, they came to this puny, putrid little city called Ai. I mean, this city was so insignificant that they said, look, we don't even need to send the army. Just take a little platoon and send them out and we'll wipe them. Just a little band of men is all we need. And the way we've been fighting, just a handful of guys will do the job. It's just a stupid little city. What they didn't know is that Joshua had instructed the people when they went into Jericho, don't you touch cursed materials. Don't you touch the property of these people, because these people are under a curse. And if you take their possessions, you're going to come under that same curse. And you're going to bring a curse into the camp. And we know the story of Achan, how he went and stole some of the materials, some clothing and a bit of gold and various other things, and he hid it in his tents. And so the Israelites went out to conquer Ai, and as they got there, guess what happened? Suddenly fear took hold of them. These were mighty warriors who had conquered enemy after enemy, mightier enemies than these silly little men in the city of Ai. And just as they get there and about to fight, suddenly they get terrified. And they turn and they run. They run! Cowards! They can't understand it. They've never been afraid before. Suddenly fear grips them. They try to attack and fear grips them. Doesn't make sense. Where did it come from? Now perhaps you're facing a situation like that. You've handled things fine up until now. Perhaps you've been strong in the Lord and strong in faith, and you've waged much battle and warfare in the heavenlies, even against the spirits of darkness. And suddenly a fear gets a hold of you. An irrational, stupid, childish fear that doesn't make sense. You say, but I've handled worse than this before. Suddenly I can't take it. We've handled worse financial lack than this before, but suddenly I'm terrified that the money's not going to come in. I've handled worse physical attack than this before, and I trusted God for healing, but now I'm afraid I'm going to die. What's happened? Where did it come from? Joshua went and fell before the Lord and said, God, what's going on? Hey, Lord, I'm afraid to admit I'm even part of these people. They got afraid in battle and turned and ran. Lord, these are Israelites. They don't do that. God said to Joshua, there's a curse in the camp. There's a curse in the camp. They had to single out Achan and pull him out. And they had to pull out Achan and his family and everything he owned and destroy it. Cruel. Why did his wife and kids have to get destroyed too? I'll tell you why. Because they had become so contaminated with that curse that it was the only way they could get rid of it. They had to stone them to death. They had to take all of their property and burn it to get rid of that curse. And only then was the power broken. And then they could go and they could defeat Ai quite easily, without a problem. A curse will bring into your life, firstly, the spirit of fear. And one of the first signs or manifestations of a curse is going to be fear. Particularly when that fear is something that wasn't there before. Watch out for it. Watch out for a sudden fear that you've never experienced before. And say, hold it, where is this coming from? It's coming from a spirit of fear. It's coming from an attack of Satan. But Satan can't just walk in and attack you anytime he likes. He's got to have an open door. He's got to have a license. And he's been given that license through a curse that you picked up. And as that open door to fear is given to him through the curse, he will walk in, and 3 evil spirits are going to walk into your life and begin to affect you. And they are the spirit of destruction, the spirit of loss or theft, and the spirit of strife. And immediately you'll begin to experience in your life destruction, things going wrong, things breaking, ill health, whatever it is. You're going to start losing things, whether it be by theft, whether it be lost opportunities, whether it be lost relationships. There's going to be strife, there's going to be conflict suddenly come out of nowhere. An open door. An open door created by a curse, but the open door is fear. And you've got to close that door. And I'm not going to go into detail tonight because we've dealt with that in our other series. We've dealt with curses, and you need to know how to handle curses. But fear and a curse are intricately related together. You see why Satan wants you to fear? Because when you fear, the door is open for him to come and steal everything you got. The door's open for him to come in and destroy everything you got. The door's open for him to come and take away your peace and your harmony and your love, and to take away the blessing of the Lord in your life, and to make you so miserable that life's not worth living. All that because of fear. Are you still thinking fear is just a little thing? You're still thinking fear is just something insignificant that I just have to live with? Listen, you better deal with that fear in your life, because until you deal with that fear, Satan is going to have carte blanche to destroy you. We need to know the truth. Fear does not come from God. Fear does not come from God. The scripture says God has not given us the spirit of fear, but has given us a spirit of power and of love and of a sound mind. God's given us a spirit of power. Power. Dunamis power. We can overcome anything in the world. We can overcome anything that Satan throws at us. We can overcome the weakness of our own flesh. God is bigger than the boogeyman. Amen. He's bigger than anything else that you fear. He's more powerful than anything else that you fear. He's more powerful than cancer and sickness and disease and heart attack. He's greater than the spirit of death. He's greater than pain and suffering and lack and poverty and humiliation. He's greater than everything that you can ever fear. He's bigger than the bully. He's stronger. Oh, you know, I was always weak and frail when I was younger.